Hello, and welcome to the Hit Like a Girl podcast. My name is Joy Rios, and today I'm talking with Jody Neuhauser, the co-founder of Overerrra. Overerrra is the first intelligent fertility platform for men and women that matches them to the products and services they need as part of their trying to conceive journey. She's also the founder at Reneu Travel, where she's taking 20 female founders to Capetown, Africa, to freeze their eggs at a third of the cost of clinics in the U.S. She's super ambitious and making an impact in women's health around the world. I really loved hearing about it, and I think you will too. So let's get started. Jody, thank you for joining me today. I am really excited for this opportunity to get to know you better and get to know how you spend your time with your organization and like your place in the healthcare IT ecosystem. I liken healthcare as a super complicated place, like a 3,000 piece puzzle or 10,000 piece puzzle. And each one of us kind of holds one puzzle piece. And a part of what we're trying to do here at the podcast is really identify okay, how can we learn from each other? How can we connect these dots and start to see a big picture? So hopefully we can leverage and get farther faster in the whole case of healthcare. How can we make it better for more people? So yep. I would love it if you could take a moment to introduce yourself and what you would consider your piece of that health IT puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. So Joy, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have a conversation with another powerful woman in this space who's just working really hard to amplify female voices. The more we are heard and the more we are out there, I think the more power we can continue to bring to everyone, ourselves and to patients. So really excited about it. In terms of where I see myself in the healthcare ecosystem, so I think in a couple of different ways. I build startups in the women's health space. And so I don't build just one or just a couple. I'm a problem solver and see opportunities mostly in the reproductive health space, and then work tirelessly to create valuable and profitable companies around all of those problems. So I'm solving a couple of them right now and working on a couple of them that I'm very passionate about. But like you and like you just described the ecosystem, one of my passions is taking siloed data and bringing it together in a way that can be interpreted and actually used on a personalized level. So that's where a couple of the companies that I'm working on are solving things in that space of aggregating data or products and data in order to be able to be more useful in a simple way to consumers and to patients.
So can you share with us some of the problems that you're solving right now? The ones that you're the most passionate about?
Absolutely. So I'm a co-founder of a company called Overerrra, and Overerrra is a one-stop shop for content and commerce for those going through the trying to conceive journey. So when I looked across this space, I've done a lot of work in reproductive health. And as women, when we get to a point where we're trying to conceive, we know at about the 3-month mark, that's where shame starts to kick in. And we start to think, what's wrong with me? Why is this not working? What's wrong with my body? And there's a whole range of emotions that we know that we go through. And right now, there really isn't one place for people to go. So the natural first stop is Google. And there's a ton of products and services and information and content, and it's just overwhelming, and the process is overwhelming in general. And same thing with the data that's there. So Overerrra we're essentially aggregating both content and the product side, and then we've created a tech platform that will navigate you through and match you to the products and services and content that you need based on where you are in your journey. So we know we're building a company for women, to try to get pregnant naturally, to provide more access to fertility and reproductive care and content. Hopefully, so before they get to the need for a fertility clinic, but then also, sending people there quickly if that's what their physiology requires.
That's fantastic. I mean, I imagine with Google, the results depend on your location, what your search history has been, and it's not a cookie cutter by any means. So I'm not that Overterra would be, but I'm sure that it's much more focused and filtered specific to the person who's searching for answers.
Yeah, exactly. So we know that just on Google Shopping alone, there's 147,000 products that show up when you type in the word fertility. And so literally just where do you start? And those are there's everything on there from a fertility tea to a weird oil that someone's concocted up that helped them with their fertility. And so we're really bringing the science and the people together in a way that changes lives, and helping people understand what is scientifically backed, what is research backed, what has research behind it, and what may be something that could potentially be a waste of money for them. So there's the curation piece of it, and then there's also the discovery piece of it. So there's a lot that women don't know about their bodies and about their reproductive health. And we know that about 60% of women fail a quiz on their own fertility if you just ask them kind of how their body works at a very basic reproductive level. And so when you get to this point where you start having trouble, I've talked to CEOs of major companies who've said, I'm a JD MBA and I didn't know this, and I didn't know this was happening about my body. So how do we provide a discovery platform for women to not only understand what's happening with their body at a scientific level, but also things they should be thinking about trying. So we know that there's a lot of lifestyle factors and things you can change, for example, in your diet and in your home, that may help you or support you in your reproductive goals. And so we're surfacing those as well for women too.
That is so powerful. I mean, I'm sure like many women have just like nowhere to go or trying to figure out, like you said, like what's the right answer? You've got 147,000 choices. Where do I go from here?
Yeah. Yeah. And this doesn't even bring into account, your partner, depending on how you're building your family, whether you're a single mom by choice or LGBT or lots of different ways to build a family these days. But we're a very inclusive brand. So we don't just look at what women need, but we also look at what are the products and services that might also support sperm health, for example, and the other side of the equation as well.
That's great. Okay, so that's one of the businesses that you're working on. What is another one?
So then the second one is actually, it's called Reneu Fertility Travel, and this is an opportunity for women to go actually to South Africa to freeze their eggs. And this came out of my own personal journey. I was living in New York for 15 years and hadn't met anybody, and was working on a number of businesses. And when you're a startup founder, all your money and time and effort goes into your business, not necessarily into yourself. And I decided my sister is married to a South African, so I was going there for the holidays and just decided to look into how much it would cost. And it's a third of the cost to do it in South Africa versus in the US. So I actually went to South Africa, froze my eggs, ended up meeting, ironically, my now husband on that trip on Bumble.
Wow.
And
was he South African or is he South African?
He is,
okay.
Yeah, he is South African, and our first date was the night of of my trigger shot. So it's a very intimately woven into my fertility and entrepreneurship journey. And then I had a great experience, and I came back and I was telling a number of friends and other female founders of businesses about it, and they all asked, how can I do this? So we decided to put together, basically productize it and put it together in a business. And the pandemic put a bit of a hold on, obviously, on all the travel. So in March of 2022, we're actually taking our first group of 20 women, all female founders, to South Africa to freeze their eggs, to meet each other, to be supported by each other, and to just kind of go through this experience together, rather than doing it alone. So
I love it.
yeah.
I moved to Mexico just before the pandemic, and I've been really like thinking about different ways to have events and invite more people over here, and just sort of have, like, honestly, I think of it as like adult slumber parties. Like, I feel like I really missed that from our childhood.
Yeah, exactly.
But in the same way that I'm just like, oh, how can we support each other with our lifelong goals? Like, oh, do you have a business plan that we can all work on together for a week or something along those lines? And I love thinking about that. And I love the fact that you've actually taken that concept and are making it happen. How do you do you know these 20 women? How did they apply? How did you get to that level?
Yeah, we're working on that right now, putting together the group. We had a couple of information sessions and have a couple more coming up, and it's really just through my network. I think one of the things I love about being an entrepreneur in the healthcare space, and especially a female entrepreneur in the healthcare space, is it feels it's the only space in which I've spent my career, or I've had in my career, where it literally feels like rising tides lift all boats.
Totally.
Every single female founder who is working on something amazing, even if there's a competitive overlap somehow, is willing to talk, willing to share, willing to pay it forward, willing to help. And I think we have a bright light ahead of us in women's health, just judging by the female entrepreneurs that are building some amazing companies, to solve some of the really complex problems, in our space. So really just reaching out to my network there.
I love it. And I also like the idea of co-opetition. Have you heard of that before?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yep.
that. Where you're just like, hey, listen, we're clearly interested in the same things. You're probably doing a similar level of research or, reconnaissance, whatever. Like we're interested in the same thing. How can we make each other better instead of how can we I don't know, how can I do better than you and push you down, sort of a thing. Like we do rise by helping each other up. And it's that nice kind of competition that is like, oh, you've gotten to this level, that's going to help me get to the next level, which might help you get to even farther, and hopefully just spread that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a very key concept that is prevalent, I would say, in the women's health startup space right now. In the ability to really help each other, we all rise. And I think what we all have done, as we've been building our pitch decks, we've realized just how big the opportunity is, and that we need, more than one company in this space in order to generate awareness, in the broader investment community, for example. We need more than a couple of exits in fertility and in menopause and in, menstrual care and menstrual education. And again, in order to keep attracting that later stage downstream investment. And so it's actually better for us to have a couple of people working on the same problem. And we can all get there faster if we share resources and information versus us all needing to do it all individually. And that's what I really like about what we're building with Overerrra, is we're actually aggregating a lot of these resources and products and services, that women and female entrepreneurs are building in this space, and not only raising awareness for them, but actually helping them acquire customers. And if we can pay to acquire a customer onto the Overerrra platform and then send them in 6 different directions, based on 6 different products or services that they need, then it's helping the entire ecosystem, because it's lowering that cost of acquisition and kind of spreading that across a broader group of companies.
Yeah, totally. So can I ask you, how did you get into this work? Like, did you know, this isn't like, I'm sure there's not a linear path that you're just like, oh, I'm going to do like, what was your major? How did you get into what you do?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I'll start at the beginning. I was born on a farm in Virginia. Very passionate I was a varsity athlete in college, so always very passionate about health and healthcare. I advised a number of healthcare startups while I was cutting my teeth in the corporate world. So spent some time at Omnicom and Condé Nast and WPP, just really diving deep on how to reach a consumer and get to understand, where consumers are, what drives consumer behavior. And then, made a pivot to starting to build some technology in the luxury hotel space. But the luxury hotel was actually in education, and it was in how do you educate, luxury hotel employees on service delivery, and how do you help them improve their own service delivery. And so, breaking down content, putting it in very simple, formats, and video, audio, text, you name it. And then just my own journey. I mean, I knew that I wanted to pivot into women's health at some point. And then I just used kind of, I would say, the last 4 or 5 years of my own personal journey. I was training for an Ironman, so I had a coach, and I had a nutritionist and I had a functional medicine doctor, and all kind of helping me be in the best shape possible for the Ironman. But then I realized that nobody was looking across the board at the data. Like there were just all these silos, and no one was able to interpret. My nutritionist didn't know how to read my genetic test, and my functional medicine doctor didn't really know how to integrate my training from the Ironman. And so that was really the kind of start of that. And then that was the start of my passion for interpretation and how do we make all this data work together in a way that's actually usable. And then separately, my passion for access really came from my farm background. I was living in New York City, and my whole family is from family farms in South Dakota and Arkansas. And it really made me angry. You talked about, anger kind of fueled your starting the podcast. And it really made me angry that only because I lived in New York and had a decent paying job and had, could afford access to a functional medicine doctor and a couple of other specialists, that I was able to have a different care experience than my cousin who lives on a farm, 60 miles from the closest place to buy milk in South Dakota, who has the same dream of having a family. And so how do we take this access or how do we take this data and this education and break it down and in a way that democratizes access to it for more people?
I love it. I love that you take your experience and turn it into action. And also, I'm very impressed on the Ironman. Which one was it?
I did Ironman Maryland. I think it was either 2016 or 2017. But it was the one where it was a hurricane and the swim got canceled, and it was a big disaster, but it was an amazing experience and certainly something I would recommend to anyone who's thinking about potentially really challenging themselves in that way.
Super. Yeah. I mean, spent a lot of time in San Diego. It's like the Ironman training capital of the world or whatever. Like everybody's swimming, biking, running all over the place. It's great.
Yeah.
And it's nice just to see everybody out and about and like know people that they're just like, oh yeah. Like my cousin, he's like, I'm on my third Ironman now. I'm like, no biggie. And you're just like, it's such a huge deal. Like, especially to get into the mental place that this is something that I can do. And then having done it, and then I feel like it kind of opens up other doors for you, whether or not it's in your personal health journey or even your professional journey, that you get to start to actualize, like, no, I can do hard things.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I would say, taking away one of the biggest lessons from the Ironman is there's nothing now, or very few things now, that I look at as like, oh, that's going to be really hard. I'm like, I know I can do it. There's a trust and a resilience, I think, that comes with going through both the Ironman training and then the actual race. And I think the training is actually a great analogy for startups, because it really is just about one foot in front of the other. You have a vision of the finish line, but that the moment in which I just finished a 112-mile bike and I knew I still had to run a marathon, I remember like particularly thinking to myself, like as I came out of the chute to start the marathon, I'm like, okay, like new chapter, one step in front of the other, 1 mile at a time. Like I just, I'm not gonna, I want to get to the finish line, and I know that I'm going to get to the finish line, but I can't will myself there. I have to actually do the work in between to get there. So it's it feels like that sometimes when you're running a startup. So,
well, I can totally relate. The closest thing that I have to come to it is I did ride my bike twice from San Francisco to Los Angeles as part of the
That's
tricycle. Yeah. And
yeah.
It's 545 miles. It's not in a day. Thankfully, it's over the course of 7 days. But like the shortest day is a 60-mile ride. The longest day is like 110. And like by day, every day is a minimum of 60 miles. So by like day 3, day 4, you're really like hitting a wall. And, like not only is your body just sort of chapped and sore and tired, but you really have these like mental challenges of like, am I going to be able to complete this? And if anybody else tells me that it's all downhill from here, I am going to like punch them. Right?
Yeah. But I think in that situation, you probably had wind, you probably had rain at some point. Maybe, you have all these things that you don't really anticipate. And I think the more experiences we can have, especially as women in business, going through things like that, the more we realize that, it's not gonna the more we realize how solid we are, it's not
Yeah.
gonna knock us off. It's not gonna knock us off course.
I mean, that was definitely an experience for me. The first one I did was in 2008, and it was definitely like probably one of the things I'm the most proud of, and built up that resiliency of feeling like if I can do this, I could literally do anything. And
Yeah.
having that like the mental challenge of, okay, well, I'm not going to think about the finish line, I'm just going to think about the next one. Am I like, we would break it up into 4 rest stops, and I'm halfway to the halfway point, or I'm halfway to the halfway point. And like really
Yeah.
just like focusing on like the next thing, and teaches you how to be present, how to really actually like enjoy the moment that you are in, and not try to be living in advance, as well as the pace. For me, I was like, I really like the pace of being able to experience the state of California at like the pace of a bike. Like
Yeah.
that's not very common that you're like, oh, I'm paying attention to, the wind, or the blades of grass that are like blowing, or the horizon, or whatever bird is right there. And you're just like, oh, this is like such a special thing. And no regrets. That
Yeah.
was one of the
No.
hardest things I've ever done, and I would do it again. I like no regrets about it at all.
Well, I definitely would highly recommend it. Anyone, putting something like that in front of them. I think the other lesson for me, which came out of the Ironman, is that it's about being uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and pushing through the growth comes in where you are uncomfortable. And I've run a number of marathons as well, and I always, regardless of whatever shape I'm in, I always, I remember those. There's always 3 18-mile runs that you have to do as a part of your training run, or your part of your training. And inevitably I get to mile like 15 and I'm still feeling good. I'm like, this is great. And then there's this, and it happens in the race too, where there's just this moment where it just switches and you're like, oh my God, this is really hard. And I want to stop, and I don't want to do this anymore. And my body's shutting down. And why? And I particularly remember these Sunday afternoons where I would be training for the Ironman. I'd be running in Central Park, and it's like, okay, I've already run 16. I've got 2 more to go. And I knew exactly the loop that I had to do to get the 2 miles in. And, I had to run by the exit to go to my house at Central Park.
Uh-huh.
And it's so easy to just turn right and go home, and you've already run 16 miles. That's a huge, it's a great experience. But I always reminded myself in that decision point of turning right or continuing to go on the last 2 miles, is like the 2 miles is where the growth comes. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's where actually the push comes, and that's actually where the training comes. If I give up now, I've basically just run 16 miles to lose the lesson. And because you have to run the 16 miles to get you to that point to then be able to get the growth. So I think that for me, that was a huge experience that I've now transitioned over into business, and just saying, okay, I'm going to do all this work to push through the comfortable to get to the uncomfortable. And then actually the uncomfortable is where the coolest part of the
Right.
experience is
And
coming.
I think that that's such a great mind trick. Once you like really internalize that, and realize that once you are uncomfortable, that to be grateful for that place, that like how fortunate are you to be in that position that you can experience this growth, because otherwise, to your point, you wouldn't have gotten there. You're either comfortable or growing, but not both.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm a big fan of that. And my husband reminds me of that of all time. He's an executive coach. And so I live with a coach, which is great and not great sometimes. But he reminds me, all the time, like, what can we be grateful for in this lesson? Why has this been put in front of us, and what are we learning from it? And it's a startup is, new lessons every single day.
Right.
So
I love it. So, okay, I've been asking everybody and I love the answers, but what do you think 10-year-old Jody would think about what you do for a living?
I love that question. That's great. So 10-year-old Jody I think she would be excited about what I'm doing. I think she would probably not be surprised. So there's a funny story. When I was 10 years old, I don't know if I was 8 or 10, but somewhere around that time in my life, I'm an educator at heart, and I come from a family of entrepreneurs and teachers. And so when I was growing up, I didn't play Barbie or other kind of more traditional kids games. I actually played school, and I have a little sister who's 5 years younger than me. And we had this little antique desk, and literally I would print out math worksheets on our dot matrix printer and make her do these math worksheets. And one day we were playing outside and I needed a chalkboard to play school, and I picked up a rock and actually used my uncle's truck as the side of my uncle's truck as the chalkboard. So I think 10-year-old Jody would not be surprised that I have now landed in building companies that at their core are really about educating in a simple way patients and consumers.
And perhaps being a little bit disruptive.
Yeah, probably being exactly like being a little bit disruptive, and but also bringing people together. I think I also was I've been a connector my whole life. So I think I'm a learner, I'm a connector, kind of an includer is another descriptor that I use sometimes. And so I wouldn't just play school with my sister. We would also have all the stuffed animals and we would have like a whole class that that I was teaching, and even though my sister was the only real student in the space.
I'm picturing ET in the back, like hidden in there.
100%. That we had the Cabbage Patch Kids. We had the what are those little like stuffed bears?
The Care Bears.
Care Bears. Yeah. We had the whole class that was there, but my sister was the only one doing the actual math worksheets.
That's so fun. I love my sister. Is she older or young? She's younger. If you said 5 years younger.
Younger. Yeah. So she's younger. She got all the athletic talent in the family. She played professional golf, and that's how she met her wife on the professional golf tour, the LPGA tour, and her wife is South African. So that's the initial tie to South Africa.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Well, I like how you guys, I wouldn't say that she only got the athletic gene. I mean, clearly.
She got let's put it this way, she got the hand-eye coordination and I got the endurance.
Okay,
so
fair.
Actually, if you put us together, then we would be a really dangerous athlete. Don't ask me to hit a ball, and don't ask her to run more than a mile. So it
that's
works
fair.
out well. Yeah.
Well, what advice would you have for either 22-year-old Jody or somebody else who is entering their career? Is there anything that, like, sitting where you sit now, having learned so many lessons, like what would you share with your younger self?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I recently guest lectured at the University of Virginia, and it was great to be in a room of just so many energetic 20-year-olds about to start their career. And we talked a lot about the importance of building your network. And so, spending your 20s in a town or in a space where you can meet lots of different people who are different than you, both professionally and personally. I look back at my network now, and it's given me so much freedom, because especially as an entrepreneur, like I'm never worried about not having a job. And I think once you're kind of released from that pressure of where am I going to work, how am I going to get a job, then it opens up so many doors and allows you to really dream. And I talk about my network as kind of my safety net for that, which allows me to do that. And so I spent my 20s doing that in New York City. So that would be one, build your network. And I think two, get support and invest in yourself sooner than you think. I, for a long time, didn't, I just was like, oh, I'm not going to spend the money on a coach or on this type of support or that type of support. And again, just the amount of, I've been able to go so much faster after being surrounded by a community of people, both professionals, and personal friends, my kind of personal board of directors that are in your life. So don't feel like 22-year-old Jody would have felt like she needed to do it on her own. And I would say 38-year-old Jody absolutely doesn't want to do it on her own now. I'm like, where's my support? Where's my team? Let's do this all together.
There's a huge lesson in that. And I have been kind of living that a lot lately too, is just like, you can't be the expert in everything. It's just not possible. And to want to do it all your own. I mean, I feel like I sort of at times have prided myself on being self-sufficient, and now I'm finding so much more strength and like inner and outer strength from leaning on the network and people that like, and also like the concept of giving, like as good as it
Mhm.
feels to give something to somebody, like when you don't allow somebody to give that back to you, how you're actually kind of like taking that pleasure away from somebody, the pleasure of giving. And
Yeah. No, I think exactly. I think encouraging, and that's what I encourage the teams at UVA to do, is just reach out to someone if you're interested in their story or their company. They people like to share, and giving people an opportunity to talk about themselves, to share their lessons, to share what they've learned, is a gift to them. And I think it's that shift in that context of, oh, I'm bothering them, or oh, they don't have time for me, or I don't, they're not going to write me back. It's just, hey, I'm giving them an opportunity um, to tell their story to me, and that's been an important context shift for me in a fundraising context. Being a female founder, raising venture capital, or about to raise venture capital for our company. Really, just talking to investors from a context of, I'm giving you an opportunity to invest in us, as opposed to, oh my gosh, please give me money. I think those
right.
are two very different ways of approaching
Can you
the
give me a pep talk on that?
conversation.
Because I struggle. I genuinely struggle, because I think in my head I'm always like, oh, I'm asking for money, and I just am inherently uncomfortable with that. Like I'm like, that's a weakness. But I think that you're hitting on something that I don't know. Can you expand?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that because it's just a more recent shift, I would say, in the last 6 to 8 months, where, and I think part of it has to do with the fact that there's a lot of capital in the market right now, and it's a relatively easy time to raise money, because there's a lot of free flowing capital. But I'm looking at the investment opportunity, or the ability to raise, our opportunity to raise money, as like, it's at like from more of a place of empowerment and power. Like, I'm building an amazing company, and I'm looking for the right people to help me accelerate this growth faster than I can do it on my own. And we have an opportunity to build something amazing together. And so when we go to market, it's if you go to market with that concept, and you're having context, sorry, and you're having conversations from that context, then when someone says to you, like, or starts to question your idea, or starts to ask questions, or tell you how you should be running your business, or you should, and especially if it's a male, to be honest, especially if it's a male VC, then for me, it's much easier to say, well, you're just not the right one. Like,
Yeah.
thanks for your ideas. Happy to take those on board. We'll look at some of them, but that's, I'm building the business this way, and we'll, integrate what makes sense. But I'm not going to shift my whole business because you think I should be running it that way. And if that's how you want us to work together, then I'm going to go look for another investor.
Right.
Like,
Right.
it just doesn't work that way. So I think the context in which you go into the conversations about, from a place of power.
You asked, Joey, you asked about how to expand a bit on this context around fundraising. And I think it's really about going into it from a place of empowerment, and a place of power. And then also that really thick skin of not taking things personally. And that's really hard to do. And it's really hard to train yourself to do that. But it is, again, very freeing, and a very powerful place to come from once you've conquered that. So looking at it from you're giving someone an opportunity to invest in your company, and to build something amazing with you, versus you have to have this person in order to keep going. It's essentially knowing where your value comes from, and where the value sits. The value sits as an entrepreneur with you. The value doesn't sit with the investor. They're bringing cash to the table, and hopefully they're also bringing, other help and other connections, and other value. But really what they're bringing to the table is cash. The actual value creation in the business sits with you and your team. And so remembering that has been really helpful.
There's even just like kind of even stepping out, and I'm sure that with your experience because you have lived in that world, and VC is probably like that whole funding and going after funding and offering funding is somewhat familiar to a degree. I feel like there's a mindset shift that probably is really helpful for a lot of women to go into, like, just like that, what you just said a minute ago, that you're like, there's money out there, like, and it is free flowing. But to actually believe that, you're like, oh, maybe it is for other people, but why wouldn't it be for me? Like, and there's a mind shift in there. Like, some people call it an abundance, like a way of thinking in abundance versus like thinking in terms of like things that are lacking. And it's sort of where you're coming from, and I think that you're hitting on it. But like, I do think women, and I will include myself in that, that like have struggled with the idea that like, oh, there's more than enough out there, and it's there's no reason that it shouldn't be like slotted for you or me, right?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely a mindset shift that I would love more women in particular to work through, and it is a thing to work through. And I have found an amazing executive coach who's helped me work through that. And so back to my point about get the support that you need. There's lots of people out there who the answers are in you. The answers are in you, and that shift is inside of you. Sometimes it just takes someone else to help you pull that out and actually have it drop, what I call it, drop into your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And it is that shift from scarcity to abundance. And
Yeah.
so there's a mindset of, oh, there's not enough for me, there's not enough opportunity, to there is enough opportunity, there is going to be enough, and believing that in the future there's going to be enough. And I still have moments of that all the time. I've spent my own kind of personal dollars on a number of things where maybe from a scarcity mindset, the old version of Jody would be like, oh, you can't afford that, you can't do that, like you shouldn't invest that money right now to do, XYZ things. To, you know what, I'm going to invest it, and I'm going to just trust that it's going to come back, and I'm going to trust that it is going to generate more abundance. And to our, our opening part of our conversation, once you put that idea of abundance out there into the world, it's been mind-blowing to me how many things have come back my way that I never would have expected and never would have dreamt could happen.
Yeah. So my sister she's also an entrepreneur in another industry, but one question that she has been asking herself and her team is, what are my own limiting beliefs? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are the beliefs that I have that might be limiting me or us in our growth? And then identifying those, like, how can I shift those too? And it's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, it's a huge piece of work. And I think I do really believe as an entrepreneur, we are moving away from we're moving away from the industrial age into the age of consciousness. And I am a big believer in conscious business and conscious capitalism, and that really there's a personal awareness that we all have to have about ourselves in order to be good leaders, to be good mothers, to be good partners, to be good executives. And so one of the kind of justifications, I guess, I had in my head of investing in someone like an executive coach was, I can't lead an organization or a team until I can lead myself, until I know myself, and I know those self-limiting beliefs, and I know what's holding me back. I really can't, I can't motivate, and I can't, create a vision for an organization, and then really, bring people kind of with us to make that happen.
I love all of that. That is super powerful stuff, Jody. So if people want to follow you, work with you, find out more about any of the organizations that you are supporting and working with, like, where would you direct them?
Yeah, on LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You can find me at Jody Neuhauser there, and then also on Instagram at Jody Neuhauser. And then our business there it's myoverterra.com is our website. And right now we make the industry leading supplements for people looking to have a baby, to try to conceive. So.
Wonderful. I will include all of that in the show notes. So thank you so much.
Perfect.
Yeah, this has been a real treat. I really appreciate this time that we've had together. So thank you.
Thanks, Joy. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to continuing to learn from you and the rest of the amazing women that you have on your show every day.